If somebody were to take a finger off your hand, you'd be very angry and you would say, hey, how dare you do that, right? This is a crime. If somebody took away your leg, you'd be super angry. You'd like go to the court and like, hey, this guy did this to me. Yet, most education systems are taking away your capability to think, and somehow that's not a crime. And just like religion, people are inducted at the very youngest ages, right?
Stick Your Neck Out, the weekly podcast of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation.
Classrooms did not exist 400 years ago. They will not exist 100 years from now. I'm quoting my guest today, Abhijit Sinha. Welcome to the podcast to restore your faith in humanity. Welcome to Stick Your Neck Out. After a small, inspiring break, we are back with our weekly podcast, and I'm very happy you are listening to us today, since we have some, we believe, very good news. After our last episode with Sabriye, one of the kanthari.org founders, we received a lot of encouraging feedback from our listeners. Thank you so much. Listening to the podcast, the Giraffe Heroes Foundation team and Kanthari founders together decided that from now on, we should not only be talking to commended giraffe heroes, but we are also going to present you many of the Kanthari alumni, people who are also sticking their necks out and changing their communities from within. My name is Jean-Pierre Aguiar Durañona, and today I'm talking to a graduated Kanthari, social changemaker Abhijit Sinha. Abhijit is a young social innovator and the founder of Project DEFY. He has designed many social innovations in India and in several African countries, and we are going to be talking about all this today. But first, Abhijit, welcome to Stick Your Neck Out.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast to speak to you and to the audience that is listening. What can I say? It's a really good time to be having some conversations, I feel, especially when we feel so isolated, no? So, thank you for inviting me.
You graduated from Kanthari, a 12-month leadership program for visionaries who have overcome adversity and who are keen to drive ethical social change. At the end, you graduate as a social change maker. Would you like to explain our listeners what is a social change maker?
Well, I didn't know that word until somebody started using it to refer to me. I guess it's not a complicated term, really. It's anybody who tries to create a change to solve a problem. So not just solve a problem for themselves, but actually create a change in their community or in their society or even globally. That person could be called a social change maker. Honestly, what I struggle to understand is what other thing should anybody be doing, that shouldn't everybody be trying to solve one problem or another that that in some way changes society. So I think Kanthari uses this word quite frequently, the social change maker, and I feel that it's a nice thing because it gives everybody a sort of clarity of purpose and identity, so to speak. But I also feel that the word sort of differentiates and makes some other people think that, oh, this guy is a social change maker, he's different from me. But that doesn't have to be, right? I hope that one day people look at themselves as social change makers in their own right.
Yeah, I hope that too. I mean, Project DEFY is a non-profit which has worked with over 15 communities in India and Southeast Africa to help create their own self-learning spaces. What does DEFY means?
Well, defy, of course, is a word in itself. It means to challenge the status quo, right? And however, it expands very nicely to design education for yourself. So, in a way, the word defy is sort of how we want to do things, and the solution is in the expansion of the word. So, it is quite special to us. And sometimes people say that defy is a negative word, but we are actually quite proud that it is a little bit negative, a little bit maybe, as Sabriya would say, spicy. It makes people think that why is there a need to defy a system or something that exists. So, that's our name. Ultimately, we think that this is not a forever thing. It should at some point, the mission should be done. It should be achieved. And that's why we call it a project, a big, long one, but a project.
What are you exactly doing back there?
We do exactly what I was trying to say in terms of social change makers, right? The word social change maker was invented to talk about people who are somehow different and they actually care about their society. They want to do something. This, is very strange to us. We feel that why does everybody not care about their society? Why does everybody not think about how they can make some changes in it, or feel even capable of doing that? And we found out that the ultimate reason for all of this is the way the education system works. It is a disempowering system that makes people believe that they are a small, tiny piece in a large machine and that they have no control over. And their voice doesn't matter, their opinions and choices don't matter. They just have to keep doing their job because they're insignificant. And that mindset I first saw in my life, and then in some parts in India, and then I start traveling and I see everywhere, even countries that may call themselves developed, tend to still continue with that industrial or factory mindset. Somebody is big, the rest of the people, the masses, are small. So that's what we try to change, really. When through DeFi we create these learning spaces. There are physical spaces where people can come, from children to adults to older people. There's computers, internet, tools, trash. There's a lot of chaos and a great environment. But basically what people are trying to do there are trying to create an education for themselves, trying to figure out what do they need as individuals, what does their community need, and what does their society need, and how can they fill that gap while, how can their learning actually fill that gap, So they actually start with purpose first and learning as a way to achieve that purpose, as opposed to usual schooling system which tells you that, okay, go ahead and learn for like 20 years and now somehow you must decide your purpose, which is very strange to me. So that's what we try to do. We work with rural communities, refugee camps, in slums, basically places where which are marginalized, where very limited options exist, and nobody even expects to do learning as good as in international school environments, or for the rich people. Nobody expects that to happen there. So we work with them because we feel that they deserve it first, because they are the ones who have been put at the bottom of the ladder. And two, they actually have a bit of an advantage because they're less distracted by all the nonsense, so they're less programmed to believe things in a certain way. So when I go to a village, it's okay if a kid skips school for a few days, but in the city, it's, somebody's going to visit you and make a huge deal out of it. So that's the difference. And I think because they have that advantage, they are actually, more capable of taking control of their learning and taking control of their education, and ultimately bringing forth a new mindset towards learning. So, yeah.
Okay, so we are talking here about schools without teachers, no? I mean, basically you set up a place where the people sits and do something, or, there's nobody controlling that. It's like kind of difficult to understand.
Yeah, imagine when we were talking about this in the early parts, it was very hard for people to get it. Yes, there is no teacher there. There is no facilitator. Let's say there's not even a curriculum. There are no exams. There's no textbooks. So how would learning happen, right? We think of sources of learning. So in a school, what happens that you have this one person or a couple of people who are designated as your teachers. And they are supposed to know everything. They are supposed to be your whole and soul. All the learning has to come from them. No matter if they are good teachers in the first place or not, right? Just because they're supposed to have a quantity of information, they're supposed to be capable of being called a teacher. Now, I have nothing against teachers, but I feel that that's too much of a burden on a few people, right? And we are made to believe that we have to go to a school and buy our education from these specific people, which means that we don't look at our parents as teachers, we don't look at our siblings as teachers, we don't look at our friends as teachers, we don't look at day-to-day interactions in the market as learning. So we start believing that the only time education or learning happens is when you go to a school, sit in front of a teacher, and the teacher talks, shares a lesson, and then you give an exam. Oh yes, now I'm educated. Now I have learned something. In a Nook, that's not the case. In a Nook, you decide first of all what you want to do. You ask, you go deep into your thoughts and you figure out, okay, forget about long term. Let me just think what I want to do right now. Whether you are a 10-year-old or a 70-year-old, the question is the same. Right? And once you think about, you choose something, then you think about, okay, where can I learn this from? Right? Maybe there's somebody who already knows this, and I could ask them to share that with me. But maybe I could find a course online. Maybe I could get a book. Maybe I could do trial and error and figure it out myself and tinker with it. So the teacher essentially is my choice, not the choice of the system. I decide who to learn from and how to learn. And the moment, I feel that that's not working, I can change it, right? When I used to go to college, that I used to actually feel that I wish I could just swipe out my teachers sometimes, because they were really, some of them were really bad. And I was frustrated with them, and I'm like, but I can't do anything. Now, my learning of that subject is entirely going to be dependent on how much he or she knows or how he or she delivers. So that's a bit unfair, that's not right. And so, yeah, you could say that Nooks have no teachers, or you could say that Nooks have hundreds of teachers. And the difference really is not whether teachers are there or not. The difference really is who is looking for the learning. Right?
Okay, so a Nook is like a kind of a classroom. So everyone can go there. I mean, everyone who needs it and who wants it, regardless of how old they are or whatsoever, they just go there and have a space to do whatever they want to learn, kind of. That is the idea of self-education. But how does this idea exactly work? I mean, what's your goal with it?
So it's harder to think what you want to learn. It's easier to think what you want to do, right? So when people come to the Nook, we have something which is called the cycle system, right? So the Nook at any point is in a cycle of 3 months. And if you're a learner at the Nook, you decide, you create a goal for that cycle, right? So there's a process, everybody helps you, how, you create a SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, and so on. And you decide, okay, what am I trying to achieve by the end of these 3 months? Once you do that, you again try to decide, okay, how do I plan out this goal? What are my milestones? What are my learning sources? What tools, materials, and resources I need? And now, in order to, if you're very new at the Nook, most likely other Nook learners who have been there for some time will help you, or we have somebody who's called a Nook fellow, who's not a teacher, who's not an expert in any subject, but is trained to ask the right questions. So that person will sit down with you and really just ask you questions like, okay, why do you want to do this? Where does this interest come from? Is it your passion or your parents? Who's really asking this? That's how they decide what is it that they're going to do and how and they plan it out. Now, you might finish that cycle, and then in the next one, think that, okay, what I did was good, but I don't want to do it anymore. Right? So you can pick up something new and go in that direction. Or you can say, fine, I want to go actually deeper in what I did last time and actually turn this into something. So the way people learn the core things are actually focusing on one thing at a time in one cycle, working with a plan, working with other people, and really going and really understanding everything around it, as opposed to learning, a lot of different pieces of a lot of different things which they never use in life. So here they're actually thinking of what they want to do, and as they're learning, they're using it. Now, we don't look at the Nook as the final learning point or anything. It's not that I'm going to enter here at the age of 10 and by 16 I'll end up a nuclear physicist and then I'll be out and straight to NASA. That's not the point really. The point is to make only one small shift. The shift is in choice, right? Who decides what you will do? That's the only thing we want to change, right? Now, people who go to regular schools, they never have that choice. They are going through 15 years, 16 years, at the very best, they get to choose between a little bit more art or a little bit more physical training, right? So those are the choices, right? And it's funny because once they finish all that education, now suddenly we say, yeah, go ahead, choose what you want to do. How is that possible? Like, this is like arranged marriage. I've never dated in life, but suddenly you make me marry someone. We Indians understand this very well. So
yeah, I know.
So I find it troublesome that they don't really get to make choices and they don't get to see the consequences of those choices, especially when they're in that school environment where they could be protected. In the Nook, that's exactly what happens, right? So they make choices. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. But they get into the habit of making good choices, right? They get into the habit of understanding how learning works. Even if they leave the Nook after a couple of months or a couple of years, the thinking always remains that, yeah, if I want to learn something, if I want to do something, I don't have to wait for a degree. I don't have to wait for getting admitted to a university or for a special program. I can start right now. I can start collecting the people I want to learn from, the resources I need. I can do all of that, and I can get very far by myself. And when I start, people will join me and help me out. As opposed to participating.
Yeah, but you still have this other side of the society, which is expecting from you to have been graduated from a really good school, like with really good scores and whatsoever. How do you plan to cope with it in your project? I mean,
well, yeah, that's true. That people want, even companies or jobs, your parents, your girlfriend even, or her parents might want you to have a good certificate. Now, however, the evidence of that working out is actually reducing with time. Like, the funniest thing I feel nowadays is, I can see even at a global level that the biggest, the worst of crimes are being done by people who are extremely well educated and from, very, very good colleges, right? Forget, okay, let's not even, okay, that might be very extreme, but what are educated people doing? Right? What are they doing? They vote Trump in, right? So we make bad decisions all the time, right? And somehow, and I think everybody sort of feels it at a subconscious level, that somehow there is no clear connection between the current education that we are receiving and making good choices for the rest of humanity, right? We struggle to be compassionate. We struggle to spare an extra dollar for helping out someone. We struggle to listen to somebody's problems and pain. We struggle doing, including me, because I'm the product of the same system, right? So something must be terribly, terribly wrong, where there is really no correlation between the making of right choices and going through really good education systems or going through really high-fi colleges, right? And the more people are recognizing that, and of course, in the last 1 or 2 decades, people have started realizing that, okay, for companies that didn't matter, right? Ethical choices and all didn't matter for most, but what mattered for them was, are people skilled? Because that was the minimum promise of the education systems. And we see that even that is not happening. So, that's the least that was expected from education systems, and even that. So, what the hell is happening, right?
That's actually my question to you right now. What is the ideal learning environment from your point of view?
Ideal learning environment is one that is not fixed in one method or one way, one that is able to change and morph, that the learner himself or herself can pick it and modify it and challenge it and change it, right? It should not be such a big, Lego block structure that the one inside is absolutely unable to make any changes to it. Right? The system should change based on the learners, as opposed to that we have systems that try to change the learners, right? Which is a little bit going in the backward direction, I feel. And there's a good reason for that. We at this point, I think most people know where our education system comes from, the Industrial Revolution, and then before that, the army structures in Persia. So the idea was always a systemic control over people, and that's why education was created in the first place, so that everybody can follow an agenda. Right?
Yeah. So they teach you to follow, not to ask questions.
Precisely.
Right.
Precisely. That it was always a machine of propaganda. Then people started saying, no, this is a beautiful thing. It's a great thing. It's really amazing. And so it became somehow a force of good. And because now it is considered a force of good, the mainstream education, people are scared to challenge it. Nobody even believes that it can be challenged, that it could potentially be changed, that you could say that is wrong, right? It's like you're a monster for saying that. People. So you are against teachers? No, I'm not against teachers. I think the education system is as bad to the teachers too. Right? They treat them horribly. If it was any way beneficial for them, we would not see teachers being paid the lowest salaries and not having any decision-making power in the system. So, yeah, I think speaking overall, it might sound very extreme again, but in my opinion, the way education has continued to be over the last 200, 250 years, it almost feels like a crime. See, if somebody were to take a finger off your hand, you'd be very angry and you would say, hey, how dare you do that, right? This is a crime. If somebody took away your leg, you'd be super angry. You'd like go to the court and like, hey, this guy did this to me. Yet, most education systems are taking away your capability to think, and somehow that's not a crime, right? Somehow that is okay. And just like religion, people are inducted at the very youngest ages, right? So you have no way to get out. You have to believe. You have to. It's just the new Jesus.
To be a believer. Yeah. So Project DEFY creates schools without teachers as an alternative to the Indian educational system. Is it that bad, the Indian educational system?
Countries that were colonized in the industrial era certainly have it worse, because we had our own educational systems or models, and any country, any place keeps modifying its systems, right, with time. So we had some of ours. They were not perfect, but they would have changed with time if we were in control. However, what happened was at one point, the British, when they came to India and they had complete control, they started saying that whatever you have is absolute rubbish. What must be there should be the British education system. And they did it very cleverly, because they were very few and they cannot manage. You can only control the country by force for a couple of years. You can't do it for a century. So the only way to do that was to create another class of people that actually want to be like them, right? And they did precisely that. They created this educational model. They just brought it down, right, and placed it over our heads and said, hey, this is how you will be educated from now on. If you don't go through it, you're not educated. You are rural. You are, uneducated. And they did that and actually created, now in India, to call somebody a villager is a bad word almost, right? So where does it come from? It comes from that 200-year-old history, where just because somebody doesn't go through your school system, he's an idiot, absolutely useless to society, which is absolutely, of course, not true. They did that, and I thought this was India, of course, but it's not just India. Of course, it's as bad in any country that was colonized, because same process, same thing happened. It's worse for countries that were colonized for even longer periods. So if they got their freedom only in like the 70s and so on, so then it was even worse. However, if you really, really went to the roots of the education systems, you'd find that even the American and European systems are still based on the same fabric. That's not changed. So okay, on the surface, things look better. There's more money invested, and therefore there are more activities, and there are more discussions and maybe some horse riding. But
golf playing.
Or golf.
Cricket.
Right? So there are these things. But the very fabric of it still continues to be that the industry decides what small children need to learn. Not the other way around. Not that the people who are learning and coming up with new thought, they modify the industry. It's not like that. It's still the industry deciding everything that the school, the colleges should be learning, and they're making it their aspiration. Like, they actually feed into our minds that the best thing that could happen to our life is to get into a cubicle in their office, right? Which is certainly not true, but of course it's very beneficial for them. So if you were to take my opinion on it, I feel that there's a problem everywhere. You just have to look deep enough and you'll see the underlying clothing, which is just as dirty as all of ours, needs some work.
But luckily we have DEFY. What's the impact of DEFY? How is the resonance? Could you tell us a few experiences from participants you had and where they ended up after visiting DEFY?
So DEFY has been there for about, our oldest space is now around 5.5, 6 years. The rest are 3, 2, 1. Let's talk first short term, right? So when participants actually come to the Nook, we ask them sometimes that, why do you come to the Nook? What do you think is the Nook for you? And so on. And some interesting answers that we got. This one I always remember. We were in Punjab and we have a Nook there. A lot of kids come to that Nook, and they also go to the school, which is the only school in that village, right? So they go to the school, they come here. And this kid, he recorded a video. We had asked, like, okay, go ahead and record videos. And he recorded a video and he said, something very strange is happening. When I go to school, these friends of mine, they fight with me, and when we are writing exams, they cover and they don't want to show me what they're writing, and they're very mean. And they come here and they're helping me in what I'm doing in my project, in my thing. And he's totally confused, like, why? What is happening? Why is this happening, right? And of course, we've seen several things. When you have a conflicting system, right? People go through a lot of struggle. We had learners who came to the Nook. They developed a way of thinking, of questioning, right? And if you know anything about Indian schools, questioning is the hardest thing to do in these classrooms. It's extremely difficult. You get whacked, right? You still do, and you still do. Asking questions is a total taboo. And this guy, he goes back to the classroom, and he's like, but why are you teaching us this? He straight out asks his teacher, and the teacher's like, has no answer, of course. And worse than that, the teacher can't admit that he doesn't know the answer, right? The can't, and that's even worse. So what happens? He gets whacked and comes back like, what was my fault? Like, it's really no fault of yours, but this is going to happen when you're actually rebelling against a very big system, a very huge thing. It doesn't want to change. It has inertia. It's become, fat and heavy. It really doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
And when you will poke a needle into it, it's going to feel very uncomfortable and try to discourage you. Don't get discouraged. Maybe not the right place to express or to tell. As long as you're in school, if you're choosing to continue to be in school, well, don't expect to change them right now. But at least make sure that you're learning, you're able to manage that the way you want for at least the rest of the hours that you have. That's the least, path of least resistance for him. So this is what happens, several instances of this happening, clashes with parents and teachers. And, we even had in Rwanda, the local administrators walk in because the kids were at the Nook at 7 p.m. and they should be at home for doing homework. Which I'm like, well, seriously. So here they are making like 3D models of a house, but no, they have to go back home and write 4 + 5 = 9 about 200 times. So these things happen, and that tells us that, yeah, that's good, because this conflict is important. If there's no conflict, there's really no change here. In the long term, what we see happening, we try to keep notice of the long term with the slightly older ones, like the youth. And so we try to see what's happening with them. It's hard to do that because they go away and do their things, but we try to see, okay, how are they making choices, right? So are they still going back to, following a system, or are they picking and choosing what they want to do? So if they went for higher education or a college, whose choice was that? As long as he or she is making the decision, even the mainstream system is an option, and that's great. You can choose, and if you're choosing, then you can leave also, right? So that's perfectly fine. One of the good examples of this was actually with Kanthari. Kanthari was doing the Kanthari talks in Bangalore, I think 2 years back. We went to see, of course, all the talks, and we are sitting in the stadium, and I come out in the break. And one of our learners from the village, which was like, 30-40 kilometers out, he walks up to me and he's like, "Hi, Abhijit. Wow, what are you doing here?" He's like, "Oh, I'm recording the whole event."
Great.
Oh, well, awesome. That's amazing. How did you, I had no idea how he got there. So he said, "Oh yeah, no, there were these video guys who had come to the Nook. I really liked what they were doing. When they went away after a year, I contacted them, got an internship. And since then I've been working with them. They pay me." And that guy is like 20. So, there are several instances when we are able to see. Many times it's very hard to see because they're spread out and they're doing their own thing. But also, of course, there's going to be some times when people have to go back to, or under family pressure, or they get married off, and all that thing that's part of the reality. And it's not that every time people are able to make decisions in their life right then. Maybe in the future, maybe how they raise their children will be different. Maybe, what is okay and not okay for them will be different. So that's our hope, that we don't expect that everybody will this will be like 100% result or anything like that.
Of course, yeah.
But we do expect that there'll be small changes in the way people think, and that will show more people that okay, there is a slightly different way of thinking about learning. And honestly, I don't feel that the Nook is the perfect alternative or anything. It may not be, but it is the perfect experiment. So see, the problem has become that everybody wants to have the perfect education system, and therefore they're scared to challenge it in the first place, right? However, experimentation is what helps us create better systems all the time, right? So don't get stuck on one system. So our hope is that because of our experiment, many more people will start experimenting. Many more people will start trying out. Maybe they will come up with something even better, right? And we will get back to the cycle of really experimenting with the fabric of education, which we haven't done, honestly. For Europe it's been longer. For us it's been about 250 years, but we haven't really played with that fabric because we are too scared. We always feel, oh my god, my children, they will suffer if we play with their education. But that's precisely what you should be doing. I feel you should be messing around a little bit. You should be that will actually, the good and the bad of that will help people go through a very interesting experience.
Yeah, totally.
Whereas putting them into a road that is straight line, there's no experience there, honestly. Yeah. So yeah, that's where.
So in your dream speech, the one you used to graduate at Kanthari, you said if your motivation is strong enough, you can break all barriers. How do you come to this conclusion?
My first, I think, instance of something like this was in the first village where I almost accidentally started working. Well, so I had quit my job. I had worked in Bangalore. I stopped working after 6 months, and I moved to this village outside of Bangalore called Banjarapalya. There, I was, sort of helping another NGO, but basically I wanted to get out of the city and get out of my corporate life, get out of everything that was normal for me, and just live in a calmer and quieter place. So I was in this village, and the challenge was, of course, that we could not really communicate because I'm not actually from Karnataka. I don't speak the local language, and they didn't speak any language that I spoke, so we couldn't really communicate. But we used to sit at the local tea shop, and we used to have this every evening, have some chai and some tea, and just be on my phone playing games, mostly Temple Run then. The government school was right next door, and the kids would come out around the same time, like 3:30. They'd be hanging around the shop waiting. Some of them would waiting for the bus, some of them just chilling. And they started noticing us and me with my phone, but they would not say anything. They would just group up and stand behind and look. And this went on for a couple of weeks, until one day one of the kids just puts his hand forward asking for the phone, and I give him my phone, and then immediately he's surrounded by all these other kids in a circle, and you can't see the phone anymore. So I wait for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Phone has not come back. So I get nervous, and I try to peek inside what's happening. I see that the phone is not with this kid anymore. It's with like the fourth or fifth kid in the circle. And they're playing Temple Runs furiously, as if, they've been playing forever. In the next few days, they broke all my high scores, and I could not play anymore because it was just too difficult to beat them. This was, to me, quite surprising, because one thing I had figured out, the village was really small. You could see almost everyone. At that time, no smartphones still. I'd also found that there was no computers in the school. I mean, this is sort of controversial, because the kids told me that there were some computers given or donated to them by some Europeans, probably Dutch people, and the headmaster then, after they left, he sold them, and the kids never got to use them. So I knew that awesome. the experience with digital stuff was very limited, but still they managed to use it and play this game. And then we tried the same experiment with laptops. This time it took them 3 hours, and they figured out the laptop and got into the games actually on the internet without no instructions given, nothing, right? And I see this again and again and again and again. In Punjab, the same place I told you, we put laptops on the third day, and trust me, nobody knew how to use laptops at that point. On day 3, all the laptops were in Punjabi, and we couldn't use it anymore. Right? Somehow they figured out how to change the language of everything, include like not only Google but the whole system language. And we had to spend hours to make it back into English so that at least we would understand. So this keeps happening. And when you see the kind of things people do, when you see a 10-year-old kid which in school is supposed to remember the table of 5, is actually playing around with engineering that our college students are not able to do. Or when you see amazing music coming from somebody who has never been trained in music and is able to, that's when you see that people can break any barrier that they want to, if they have a goal, right? Of course, children find it easier because less programming, right? They haven't spent as much time in the system. The older ones, they struggle. The older a person gets, the more inhibitions, the more restrictions we put on ourselves, and we start believing that this is me, I cannot change, and if I'm not creative, I'm not creative. If I don't know computers, I don't know computers. So that takes actually more work. But children, they don't wait for instructions. They don't wait for you to tell them anyway what needs to be done. They just jump on it, and then either they figure out or move on. But there is, they're not at your mercy, and that's something amazing. So I think that's what I meant.
Abhijit, you are obviously an innovative guy. Let's talk about your top 3 innovations, starting with the Boda Boda. To our listeners, Boda Bodas are bicycle and motorcycle taxis commonly found in East Africa. What's the story behind it?
When I was in the last parts of my college, I had moved to Bangalore, and I got introduced to this guy from MIT who opened a lab back in my college, and it was like an open-ended lab where people actually worked on real things, on real problems. And that was amazing. So I used to travel from Bangalore back to college all the time just to be able to be there for like the weekends and work on some real problems, right? Also, this was the first time I could see that what I know and what I'm learning can actually be applied to change something. I started seeing that in Bangalore, there were at that time a lot of hackathons happening. I participated in a few of those, and luckily I won a couple in the beginning. And then they invited me to come to Uganda. And of course, why would I say no? First time to travel outside of country. That was amazing. We went there. They took us around. They took us to the district hospital. The theme was medical challenges. So anything to do with health. The district hospital was the only hospital in a 50-mile radius at that time. And it was in a bad situation. I mean, we were told we can ask questions, but people were super busy. There were people who have been operated just now. They were right outside. They were put on the grass, so because there was no space inside, no way to. So it was a horrible thing, and I waited and I asked questions. I didn't know what I want to do for the hackathon. I'm just blank-mindedly looking around. Ultimately, it sort of started feeling like the problem was not really what everybody else is seeing. The problem, everybody was looking at, the medicine is not there. There's no experienced doctors. Maybe there's not enough. There's not enough electricity available. There's not enough cooling available. Blah 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 blah. These guys, everybody else was like very technologically sound. So I always felt like, okay, I'm not that great. So I thought, okay, but maybe what if the problem is not medical in nature actually? What if the problem really is of transport, right? So, and it was. So I asked where the ambulance is, and found the ambulance in the backyard with like 2 feet of mud because nobody could afford running those ambulances. So how do people come? And I got my answer right in front of me. A pregnant woman in labor, came at the back of the Boda Boda, the bike taxi, got down in front of the hospital, bleeding, and walks all the way inside. So I'm like, well, so is that how everybody comes in? They're like, yeah, because the terrain is bad. You can't have cars traveling easily. There's a lot of trouble. Boda Boda is the only cheap option that people can use to travel. So the next day, after thinking a lot, said, okay, what if you could make the Boda Boda into something that can actually safely travel or transport people to the hospital? I pitched it. I had a Canadian guy and a Ugandan guy join me. And in 24 hours, we actually created a working prototype of that card. We went to the junkyard behind the hospital, picked up a bed, a bunch of bicycles, took it to the nearest workshop, got it welded and everything. While everybody else is working on software and electronics, we were like hardcore. And we got it made, and we called it Boda Boda. It was really like, it was not shaped properly. It was like lopsided. But we said, let's try it. And we put the clamp on the Boda Boda, and he actually took it down the hill, and it didn't break. Like, well, maybe this can work. So we got it back to the space where the hackathon was happening, and we got the Boda Boda somehow. It was, I think, 1 or 2 floors up, Boda cart, the cart bit. And we said, listen, the problem here is that people don't get to hospitals in time. Women are getting to hospitals, after hours of being, or even sometimes more than a day of being in labor, because there's no good way of getting to the hospital, and they have to travel sometimes 50, 60, even 100 miles to get to a hospital that can handle childbirth or complicated cases. So here is the Boda cart. It was a cart, simple cart, that can attach to any of the motorcycles and turn it into an ambulance. And when you don't want to use it as an ambulance, you can use it as a simple transport for carrying bananas or whatever you need to carry. Or you can unlock it and leave it near the hospital or in your village, and no problem. And so, the Boda Boda driver could charge 20% extra. It's still not much more money. And so he makes a good income too, and people can get to the hospital at a cheap cost. So that was the idea. We worked on it for a year. Then I tried to bring it to Zimbabwe, where we wanted to actually show inmates in prison how to build it, and they could build it and rent it out to ex-cons who are in the outside, and the ex-cons could actually run the Boda carts and take people to hospitals. So there would be a shift about how people think about ex-prisoners, and they could actually have a good role in society and not have to go back to crime. So there were some good aspirations with this project, but the challenge was always finding people to work with or to actually make this. I was in India, and I had also started working on DeFi, and so I couldn't be at the same time in Uganda. So and there was nobody else to take lead. So probably what happened after maybe 2 years of improving it didn't go so far. Even the president had come to see the project and so on. But nobody was investing because nobody was there really. I was not there, or nobody from the team was actually there. But the good thing that happened is other people took that idea and they created their own versions of it. Now you see several versions of that in India, in Africa as well. Not exactly the same thing. We had better engineering still, I would feel, but still the basic idea, others used it. So I'm actually happy that if others copied it,
that's also
great.
a win.
Yeah, because it felt very bad that I was not able to take it really forward. Yeah, that was the story of Boda Cart, which if I was unsuccessful at DeFi would have been my primary thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why everywhere I found something written about this Boda Cart, it said a $500 ambulance for Africa.
Because you could make it in $500, less than that. We made our first one for about $80, and even the last one we made was probably like $400. So it was, the technique to it was to not build a company around it, but actually teach the local welders and the local workshop owners so they can manufacture it themselves, and it does not have to have like many people in the middle.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? Market to market as opposed to company to market. Yeah.
You also were involved in the creation of some sort of waterless urinal?
Yes, that was another short, incomplete project that we designed in Bangalore with a bunch of people in another event. That was also pretty crazy. It was a $25 urinal which really needed only natural things, iron ores, some specific plants, a bamboo cage, and the more you would urinate, the more it helped with the plants that were growing. And the choice of ores was such that it would never smell, because there were some minerals that would prevent the ammonia from breaking out. So that was something that we conceptualized and prototyped once, but then again, it was a team of I think 5 or 6 people, and very quickly I found that it was a team of 1, and that happened too many times.
Last but not least of this top 3, the third invention is an accident app that uses the vibration the phone receives when the car is in an accident, right? Can you please go a bit more into detail on how this works exactly?
So, well, this one got me an iPhone. This was a very interesting one. So, what we did was something extremely simple. I think this was again back in 2013. Yahoo, the company, they used to do hackathons every year in Bangalore and Hyderabad. In Hyderabad, I think most times. So, I was in Hyderabad. It's a really cool hackathon. Like, you stay up all night. They have like amazing coffee and great food. And you try to come up with a problem and a solution within like 24 hours. So I, along with some other people, we decided that, the phone, the smartphone already has quite a lot of sensors, including a gyro sensor and an accelerometer, which can tell you about how you are moving or how basically the phone is moving. Using that, we created an app that would read those sensors and try to understand how the phone is moving, and if it is moving with a certain sort of frequency or at a almost like a vibration of a certain level, then it would determine that yes, this is an accident, right? So of course you could test it and see that okay, at what vibration level it's an accident, and you set the threshold. But basically it would detect it. So if you're in your car and the phone is just kept in the car and you get into an accident, the vibration will make the phone activate the alert, and you would have 10 seconds to stop the alert. And if you're incapable, like you're seriously injured, you don't stop it, automatically it sends your coordinates to the hospital, to the ambulance system, and the ambulance comes to you, and at the same time sends coordinates to your family members, like top 5 SOS contacts. That's it. Very simple thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Really uncomplicated.
But it's working. Somebody's using it. It's there something to find, somewhere to find.
Yeah, this is going to be my forever. What do you say? I saw some other people after 2 years or so. They made the same thing exactly again, but I still don't see it. It's not in my phone. It's not in your phone also, I think.
No.
Right? So it's not gone. See, the problem is some of us are good with coming up with ideas, right? But it really takes a lot of effort to make that idea into a reality, to take it actually to the market. It needs a lot of support. It needs a lot of help, and it needs at least a few dedicated people, right? And I understood that I can only, and especially because I had no salary, no income after I quit my job, I can only be dedicated to one thing and not all of these things at the same time. I of course love creating things, and so any moment I get, I would be like creating a new idea, but then those ideas can go nowhere, and I would share these ideas so that somebody else could take it, but even that is not enough. You really have to push it. So the best thing is show people how to come up with ideas, because if they do it themselves, they are motivated. They will never be motivated to take my idea forward, right? They are motivated unless I pay them a whole lot of money. Even then, I feel that the motivation is not entirely right. So that being said, DeFi sort of solves all that problem for me, because now it's not my ideas. It's actually the ideas of the learners, the people, and of course they're very passionate about it because they're following their own heart, their own ideas, their own thinking. Our team is also like that. We are into this habit of always doing design thinking and coming up with new problems to solve and new ways to solve it. Yeah, we have actually, besides the Nook, now we have 4 other programs that we came up with in this period of Corona, and we prototyped them, started working on them, and they are all moving towards reality. So now I'm actually in a better position to take things forward. But yeah, there are these innovations or things from the past that are still my regret and haven't. They're still not reality, unfortunately.
Well, maybe you managed to do some of them, like to keep going with some of them later. It was when education was taking you away from exercising your curiosity and challenging things around you that you came around to create Project DeFi and the concept of Nook as a low-cost self-learning space. People use the term social entrepreneur and social innovator to describe you, but you don't think these terms are correct. What are you then?
I think what anybody is subject to the interpretation of the observer. It's not really my I might sound a bit arrogant, but it's not my job to tell people who I am or what I am. That's my discovery or my journey to figure out. But, I like working on problems. I like trying to solve things, but I also like doing it with people. So I don't like the idea of this sort of savior complex that I will solve problems for you. I usually try to solve problems for me or for people who we are closely connected with, and that sometimes it makes sense for a lot more people. I'm just a problem solver in that sense, and whatever fancy word works with it. Social entrepreneur went for quite a few days. Social change maker, and there's many words. When I'm giving talks or anything like that, they ask me how to describe, and I say whatever you want. I think even Sabria would agree. Like we used to have a lot of discussions in Kanthari. Sabria and we had this routine of going for a swim in the lake every evening, and many times we used to discuss like what is really important. Is it this terminology that is important? Does it mean anything, or is it just the same as any certificate from school? Right? Just yet another label. Doesn't speak much, it puts you in a bucket, maybe gets you some rewards, but you don't feel good just because you have a terminology associated with you. You feel good because of what you're doing right now in the present. That's what only sort of matters. At least I find it so. So at any point of time you can ask me what I'm doing, but who I am, very hard question. I leave it to people to understand. They can see my work and they can put what label they want. I'm not so, I don't care so much about it. I'm not so picky.
Thank you, Abhijit, for being my guest today and share all these inspirational, innovative stories. It really makes one wanting to know more about DeFi.
Thank you.
So, dear listeners, if you want to support or just know more about Abhijit and the Project DeFi, visit their homepage, projectdefi.org. Next week in Stick Your Neck Out, the podcast to restore your faith in humanity, I'm going to be talking to Tony Joy, the woman who made Durian possible. Durian aims to empower rural communities in Nigeria to be self-sufficient through transforming their local waste into a means of livelihood. You'll find the Kanthari or Giraffe Hero stories every Tuesday on Spotify, iTunes, our homepage, and every other place where you hear your podcast. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't have to look out for us. We'll be coming to you. If you like to tell us about your frontline hero, visit us at giraffe-heroes.eu. My name is Jean-Pierre Aguiar Durañona, and I hope you join us also on our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. But more important, I hope you join us again next week.
Stick Your Neck Out, the weekly podcast of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation.